All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Garrett. Most of you probably know me as Sweepy. I am somewhat of a competitive MCP player. I would also call myself just a very prolific talker on the Discords. I've been playing Wakanda and raising the banner for the affiliation for about a year and a half now. And with the new Crisis updates and major event of Adepticon right around the corner, I really thought it would be a fun idea to reach out to several of some of the higher rated Wakandan players and some of my personal favorite Wakandan players. I can't be joined by everyone I talk to, of course, but tonight I'm going to be joined by Alistair, or Armageddon, from Scotland, who most recently was crowned the King of Wakanda. Connor, or Insidiously Mad, from England, who is got several other highly ranked badges on Longshanks for different affiliations and is also now chasing that King title. Jin, or Jin8WR, from Connecticut, a very regular top 10 Wakandan currently. And last and not least, season 15 TTS champion Zach, or Nitro Zeus, of Kansas City, and also a very frequent top 10 Wakandan. So thanks everyone for joining me. I can go ahead and kind of keep us nice and on topic. I'll be doing a lot of hosting here. So my first question, we'll go ahead and actually start with the most recently crowned King of Wakandan, or King of Wakanda. What drew you into playing Wakanda, and what keeps you playing the faction?
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I should say that because I got the badge yesterday and I've already, I think, temporarily lost it. I'm afraid to tell you that makes me the shortest
No.
king. I'm sorry, Sophie. I've
Oh
taken
no.
your crown.
My
Yeah,
unofficial
I
title.
guess. So I guess like that first movie. I was thinking about this earlier. Actually, that first movie that they did with Chadwick Boseman and with Michael B. Jordan was like an absolute standout when I saw it. And then when I got into MCP, I knew I wanted to play Avengers, so I was like, oh, I need to get Black Panther because at the time it was kind of their best four. And then it was an easy jump to just be like, well, these boxes were cheap. I'll pick them up. The models are pretty cool. So I was kind of playing it on the back burner. And then in Baku came out, and I was like, this model rules. This is a cool sculpt. This guy is in charge, you know? And so it was when he came out that I started kind of picking them up properly. And then in terms of what keeps me playing them, I went back to them because I kept reading you guys talking about how much fun King T was and how many dice you got to roll with King T'Challa attacking.
Hmm.
And yeah, you really do get to roll a lot of dice, and it's extremely fun. So that's currently what's keeping me coming back.
Awesome. And we'll just go down the line here, Connor, if you want to go up next, and then we'll go Jin into Zach.
Yeah, so as most people will know, was predominantly a Webs player, and I originally got the Black Panther model for my Webs list because he was obviously very good there. And then I started playing Wakanda for the build up to a big team event in London during the Spirit of Wakanda days because basically I just kind of wanted to break from Webs, and Spirit of Wakanda just kind of was like faster Webs at the time. So I was running Rhino and Miles in there and doing all sorts of degenerate turn one stuff, which was fun. And then I stopped playing that after the nerf, well, banning of R&D. And I hadn't actually played Wakanda for almost a year when the rumors of Thanos ban coming up had me like, oh, I should probably play Thanos in at least one event before he gets dumpstered. And so I decided from what I had, I was like, oh, I'll try him in Wakanda. I saw Zach's TTS final, and I know he wasn't playing Thanos, but I was like, oh, King T does look pretty sick. So I basically got King T and Thanos and M'Baku together, and with like 2 games of prep, ended up winning the event. And was like, huh, this list is pretty good. So I've then decided once Thanos was nerfed, I kind of wanted to see if the list still had teeth. And yeah, it's mostly just like King T in Wakanda is just absurdly fun and like kind of a really unique piece.
Yeah, no, I agree with especially him being a unique piece. That's a very good way to put it. Um, if you would like to hop in at that point, Jin.
Sure, yeah. Hey guys. So I actually got into Wakanda just after the Spirit of Wakanda nerf, so I never got to play with that particular style. But rather, my first inspiration was actually do the Zach, who will be going next here. He had trounced me on an Intrusions game with Red Skull 2 and King T'Challa in an M'Baku leadership. I was like, this looks so much fun to play, and it doesn't incorporate any of the terrors. So there's no Thanos at that time. There's no like Thor 2 that was like in his list, at least in that version. I was like, oh, this is something that has enough punch, but I don't have to run like a 6 threat plus model to try it. So, all right, well, if my webs kept dying during the season while EMAPs were still around, why don't I just switch to something that's just going to hunt monsters? And Wakanda ended up being a very excellent monster hunting faction, and it was a lot of fun to play between the Spirit of Wakanda, but also like Wakanda Forever, just an absurd card, and King T just like was an excellent comeback linchpin. And after the release of cards that we can talk about later on, I think like it cemented King T as a very interesting piece within Wakanda. So every time that I feel like I need a break from webs, Wakanda is my go-to faction because it is displacement, which I enjoy, but it also has a lot of teeth into it as well, and no gimmicks. It's just raw power, which is very fun to play with.
Yes, no. Once again, the King T is going to be coming up a lot. I'm sure everyone's already beginning to notice a trend there. So, Zachy, why don't you finish on off?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear I've been inspiring people. I picked up King T and Killmonger Usurper kind of right as they came out with their Rivals panel. Played them then and was really trying to make Usurper work, and it just wasn't as smooth as I had hoped with those extra dice. So I kind of put it on the shelf a bit and was tinkering with it and added Red Skull 2 and started focusing more on M'Baku. And kind of like everybody said, King T is just a ton of fun, and it has some pushing and some control where you're not, at least it doesn't feel like you're out of it, but you've got some really solid teeth with with Wakanda Forever and some other cards, and it just ended up being a ton of fun. I feel bad the first couple times I played it because King T just explodes something, and I would always feel a little bit bad for my opponent, and then it was just that kept happening, and I was like, well, maybe he just kind of does this. So really fell in love with him and the combination with Red Skull 2 and M'Baku and kind of how bursty they can be, where they can just roll a bucket of dice and do well. And it's been a ton of fun. So I've really loved playing him and hope to keep playing him for a little bit. Trying to break that top 5, maybe see if I can steal the King of Wakanda badge here one day.
Hey, someone's got to usurp the throne eventually. So I had initially had these kind of in a bigger order, but I think the next good question, in my opinion, is going to kind of lean on this like core group theory. So a long time ago, I always read like, hey, who's the core, 1 to 2 models, maybe 3 models you're reaching for in a faction. Personally speaking, I think that we're going to have a very common opinion on this one. I think that, between myself, Connor, Alma, and honestly, maybe even both Zach and Jin, I know I'm running a lot of like King T, M'Baku, and Okoye when I'm reaching for my core Wakandan, so to speak. Is that what you guys are finding yourself doing?
Yeah, I think I find myself doing something similar. I think M'Baku's got a great kit that we've talked about. I think King T is awesome, and then having a Koye, because those two models can both be pretty fragile. So having somebody who can just kind of partner up next to them, give them a little bit of safety, I think helps them go a lot longer.
Absolutely. And then I know, Jin, you tend to run maybe a little bit of a different core, if I remember correctly, watching some of your later games. Do you have a different feeling for that?
Yeah, so sometimes it just comes down to the splashes you want to take. So having the oscillation between Koi or Shuri as your third model, uh, I think gives you a lot of flexibility. And it's like, okay, well, do you need to protect like M'Baku from his low energy defense, or would you really buy more into the push effects that you have from Shuri? Because guaranteed pushes from range 5 are actually very strong. And just having an additional layer of reliability from the rerolls, I think like it does go a long way over the course of a game. And she does generate a decent amount of power, I think.
Oh, absolutely. She, much like King T, will just incrementally gain quite a lot of power. Connor, I'll have you go next. Do you find yourself reaching for a core group of Wakandans?
So I think since I took Thanos out of the list after his change, I've played M'Baku and King T every game. But I have played less Okoye than I thought I was going to, and but I also have not been playing a ton of Shuri. I've actually think at the event I was at, I think I played Okoye once, Shuri once, and then Killmonger twice.
Mm-hmm.
And it basically just comes down to the points.
Yeah.
So I would say I start the list with King T and Baku, and then the next model I add in is the splash. I think is most important for that game, and then I'll usually the third Wakandan will be based on what I need to make points work.
Okay. And Alma, what do you tend to find yourself running?
Yeah, I'm in exactly the same boat as Connor, apart from the splash that I want to run is always Hulk, which I appreciate is extremely boring and reductive, but it's
Visceral.
the same. It's just. I mean, at some point, I'm probably gonna move on from that, but like straight away when I picked them up, I was just that core group of like M'Baku, King T'Challa, and Hulk. I was like, well, this is extremely powerful, and if you add in a four, like you know yeah, adding Killmonger, you get to 19. You've got an extremely killing 19 that can retain priority against all these mid-range teams that people are messing around with just now, and you can just adjust it up and down. So that's mainly what I've been doing.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's a big correlation between the games where I play Hulk and the games that I win. So,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah, so I think that we actually are going to stumble into what I would say is one of the questions that one of you guys proposed, which is our conversation about the three threat debate. So, I know currently this is going to kind of jump into more personal takes on our rosters themselves. So, after this, if I do have access to the rosters, I will post them in the YouTube comments, or not in the comments, but the description of this video. Personally, I am not running a Wakandan 3. I'm actually running Taskmaster to make that three threat points for where it works right now. But as per usual, if you've been in the Wakanda chat, you see how frequently we all tend to almost oscillate between is Shuri good, is Storm good, and kind of address the Wakandan three threat elephant in the room, so to speak. Um,
So
Go
if
ahead.
I can just say that I disagree with the Taskmaster.
Hmm.
I think he's good though, like on paper, like he's solid. But having Wakanda Forever just being a one power participate in each doing a free attack, I think is a huge benefit. Like that shouldn't be overlooked.
Hmm.
At one of my games that you saw, Sweepy, like that Wakanda Forever was in pivotal to denying a bodyguard,
Hmm.
during a Wakanda Forever activation, and that could like be the difference sometimes, right? Like having that
Hmm.
guaranteed displacement, and then you can go in with somebody. And I'm sure there's something you can do with Storm at the end of the day, even if she is like the least, you know, I guess the least like intuitive like Wakanda three threat. That's
Yes.
what I want to say.
I like that description of her. She is probably one of the least intuitive Wakanda three threats to use with Wakanda Forever.
I would say she's actually the best three threat to use with Wakanda
Oh,
Forever if it's in her activation.
yes.
It's just typically you don't plan on it being a three threats activation. But I think Storm actually has like of the two, because if we're playing King T every game, we're sadly not really considering Bast.
Hmm.
I think Storm's ability to like double tap with six dice attacks
Hmm.
that actually do damage is kind of her main upside over Shuri. That and the combination with the stealth.
Yes, and I mean the access to the throw is also not nothing. Reaching out from range 3 to throw a character off of a point, like it's also pretty solid displacement. And then yes, just to touch on Chosen of Bast, I would love to run him, but anytime I run him, I'm not running King T, which doesn't feel great. Um,
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the model's really good, and I just can't get him on the table because King T is just, yeah, he's just so dominant for Wakanda right now.
mhm.
Like, it just
So
feels too dominant.
I've actually played Bast competitively in tournaments, but not in Wakanda. When I was still playing Defenders,
Mhm.
he is actually his damage output ceiling is kind of insane.
It is.
But yeah, it is the issue of like, whereas I think Black Panther won, even though he's not currently in my list, I think what he brings is different enough from King T that if your game plan changes, he can slot in.
Mhm.
But I think Chosen of Bast kind of is just like a budget King T in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think the worst thing about Chosen Obast card, sadly, is that it's T'Challa and not T'Chaka, because I think he's got a good
Yeah.
hit. But just it seems like the game plan all of us are playing is more attrition focused. It's a little bit taller, not necessarily like three
Mhm.
wide, all the time, but is a little bit taller. And so even that dip from five threat down to three threat, like, is going to have a pretty big impact on how wide we are. But he's got a great kit. He just King T does so many things with Wakanda Forever and um, Jabari Chieftain and all kinds of things that it's hard to bring Chosen of Bast. But I'll kind of echo what everybody said, that everybody's got their own different flavor to it. I personally have liked Shuri for those extra rerolls, but I'm not always attached to it, and just kind of she fits in when she fits in, but I'm never jumping for joy that I get to play Shuri. I guess, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think when I was still playing Spirit of Wakanda, Shuri was actually incredible in that list, and I loved her as a 3 threat. But what I'm finding now is I end up on a lot of crises where either they're too bunched and she just dies, or they're too spread out and she can't shoot between the points. So I think like it really does just depend what your crises you're running, how well she fits for me.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that
I
that's
think
a
I
valid point.
completely
I think that I've probably said it that, if you're running superpowered scoundrels, form Sinister Syndicate, that's just a phenomenal Shuri crisis. And I do genuinely believe there's probably, that scenario flavor of Wakanda still out there. That's probably still very good with like a Black Panther 1, Shuri, and even a Koye base, just to kind of build out from. Um, and kind of speaking of Crisis, it's a really good segue there. Does anyone have any final points on the 3 threat conversation?
Yeah, just a couple of kind
Yeah.
of 3 threat, I guess, tricks and considerations that were coming from my tournament yesterday. And I was discussing with people. One is just Storm can do a beam on the Wakanda Forever turn, which isn't nothing. Like out of activation beam is actually that's pretty interesting. Um, Potentially stunning people as well. But then, yeah, like Zach said, Shuri being able to not only, I mean, I think your best Wakanda Forever turns often do feature Shuri because she'll spend her power for someone to have rerolls to have an amazing attack, and then she'll do her Wakanda Forever attack and generate 2 power off of it because she'll roll a skull and get a power, and then she'll be able to do another 2 rerolls. So she only gets like net 1 additional reroll, but like she can end up giving 5 rerolls to that turn, right? And that's actually incredible. So yeah, it's hard. I'm still on Shuri, but yeah, I do think they both have merit.
Well, I can feel my list having a Shuri get added back into it here really quickly. It
Yeah,
doesn't take much to convince me to play more Wakandans in a Wakandan roster. To be fair with everyone, um, okay, I can always appreciate and get behind some Storm and Shuri love. Any other last minute 3 threats that we've considered? I know like the rogue agents themselves, just to make affiliation, is kind of where I'm at, just because I found Shuri very diveable still is kind of my big hiccup with her, and I'm not willing to dedicate Okoye or even some of my other defensive characters I'm running right now. I know I'm big on Cage in Wakanda. I don't think that that's too surprising. Cage is just a phenomenal 3 threat in general.
I think I'm in the same spot. I basically ran Shuri last event. I don't think she's necessarily out, but I think I'm not so convinced she's in that I still kind of want to test the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
So the way I think I've mentioned this in chat before, like playing webs a lot, Ghost Spider is a similar displacement piece that I don't want people to dive particularly often. And one way I do that is by making sure she's not actually scoring any points.
Mm-hmm.
Rather, if you choose the dive Ghost Spider, it would be an opportunity cost of you not scoring anything to try to get rid of this model. So
Okay.
similarly, if Shuri is not holding anything and she's not holding a point, I think that disincentivizes a little bit more for people to actually go into her. It's like, okay, you go into her, but you're not on a secure, you're not on an extract. So is it worth it for you at the end of the day? And I think that could be a way for you to think about like where she is, and also frees her up to use that range for bubble for the rerolls as well.
Mm-hmm. It's a very valid point. I enjoy that. Okay. Um. Well, I think that probably will actually. Any last minute on the 3 threats before I preemptively go to the next question? All right, sounds perfect. So I know we mentioned like maybe Shuri crises. So is anyone running any new crises from the new package of crises?
Yeah, I got
I've
a
got a new
couple in there.
posted story from yesterday as well, but you go first, man.
I'm still very undecided on crises, to be honest. I think like between I was running like super killy stuff under Thanos,
Mm-hmm.
and then with him gone, I was trying the same crises with Hulk and didn't like them as much. So I'm actually running 2 pay-to-flips and intrusions now, and I'm
Okay.
trying Mcron as one of those pay-to-flips, and I don't know if it'll stick long term, but I think it's one of those crises that a ton of people are running right now because it's super fun
Mm-hmm.
and it's a really interesting crisis, and the threat is great. I love 19 threat for Wakanda. It's probably my favorite threat. So that's the secure I'm running, and I was running unexpected guests at the last event, and I basically decided analyzed how it worked correctly, but thinking how it worked was good for me was wrong. So I've cut it and I've now put in inhuman weaponry.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got one new extract and one new secure in at the moment.
Okay. Gotcha.
So I've got one of each
So
as well. I
Okay.
also have inhuman weaponry. I've heard kind of talks about some lists that might be able to abuse it and grab both and back up. So I'm kind of pocket concerned about that, but I haven't seen that yet. So I'm hopeful that if it comes to that I can have some sort of strategy to help mitigate it. And then for secures, I've been trying out Wedding Party. I think my package of normally having Red Skull 2 and King T'Challa, and um, how consistent both of those models can be. That having two separate fights that are pretty far spread out compared to like Fisk, I think has gone well so far. Because it's just like you have kind of models that can swap out for each other. So maybe Red Skull 2 goes this time, but then next time it's King T'Challa, and you kind of have the flexibility where there's just fights in two areas and you've got two big beaters. So I've liked that so far. But I've heard a lot about Imkron, and I'm kind of curious to try that out as well. I think I agree that 19 threat is a great threat level. So that's one that I think is on my short list to test out some games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just to add on Wedding Party, I'm not currently running it, although I was on the fence. I was a bit scared that, like, having not played it, it could end up being a bit of a score out too fast versus Kingpin thing. But I ended up playing it at the event I was at versus Convocation, who brought it, and honestly, we felt really good on it.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
I
I
think.
played it against Guardians, and I felt we were really good on it. Actually, yeah, it felt like it was well suited to the amount of displacement between Mbappe, King T, and Hulk, because you can dominate the points, and it doesn't really matter if one of them loses power because King T has infinite power, and the other two, should be fine. One of them should be able to do all their kills. So, yeah, it felt quite good for me.
So,
Go ahead.
so I'll just mention that I'm currently going for a more scory
Mm-hmm.
configuration. So we have a bunch of the four secure points. So we have Mcrom, we have Deadline Destruction, and we have Guardians. Save Share
Ooh.
Empire Empress. So
Okay.
the reason my thinking is just this is that it's leveraging the displacement that we have, but also we want to be in a relative tight knit bubble so you can get a maximized focus fire Wakanda Forever as well. Red Skull also being in this, at least my list for now, being able to interact with all these, essentially for free for good effects, either to claim the point, because the grunts will always roll 3 dice, or they just roll 1 dice for the claim a point, or you just make people drop their stuff or do a damage to them. Um, so I'm thinking that that might be very interesting to do. I was initially playing some D maps, but like M'Baku just doesn't have the speed to sort of like rotate around particularly well unless you're using Jabari Chieftain. So
Mm-hmm.
like that could be a thing you can explore later. But yeah, I was thinking that the tighter secures that in the new Crisis Pack, I think it'd be a very interesting spot to try them. But I think Wedding Party, as you guys brought up, actually is very interesting as well. One new extract I'm bringing is scientific samples, because I think having 4 wide is like extracts is very fair, and it does allow you to sort of keep pace with the more scoring teams. But hopefully, what can happen is at some point you can sort of chase their extract holders down and be able to like take one for them at least, and that way
Mm-hmm.
you should be able to break the parity and win. That's my current thinking. I'm coming them as a mid-range scoring team rather than an attrition team, for my purposes.
Yeah, no, I'm
So I've got
actually
some.
very curious to hear how that plays out. Sounded like you had a point to make, Alma.
Oh yeah, it was just to pick up on what Jim was saying about Deadline. I played Deadline to Destruction for the first time. I haven't managed to play it yet. I played it for the first time yesterday. I didn't take it. My opponent brought it in Shield, and I brought both Hulks in my roster. I had Immortal Hulk and regular Hulk. So I was able to play 16. I was able to play Immortal Hulk, um, King T, and M'Baku, and it just felt completely unfair. He had a good team for it. He was on Shield. He's a good player. He's one of my WTC teammates. He had Namor, um, Agent Venom, Spectacular Spider-Man, and Shang-Chi, which I think is probably a pretty good team. He didn't want to play 16, obviously, but honestly, Immortal Hulk and King T'Challa on that map are absurd. The mobility and the damage, and then being able to activate the point as well, I think it's really abusive. So I think if I'm going to put it in, I think maybe I have to like drop Rhino, put in Battery Bill. I might drop Namor and put in a Red Skull 2, who seems also extremely good on that crisis. But yeah, I was amazed. Like I tabled him. It was not close despite him playing well. We felt like it was a major mismatch, which is partly 3 models against 4 models. But yeah, 2 of those models in particular made a big impact. So I'm definitely going to play more Deadline.
Very interesting. So, I love Macron crystals. I legitimately think it's probably one of our best crisis pulls from the new. The shape, the threat is really good, and it has a lot of little cute tricks. Is probably the best way that I would describe it. Grabbing something with a Killmonger and having him sit on the back of one of them while it makes him a big target gives him that charge no matter what in the same round and lets him contribute to scoring. I found that to be very impactful. I think I played a Hammers Macron game, and that was a super fun play pattern for myself. I don't think my opponent felt it was as fun. To get 6th and 8 from a Killmonger charge top of round 2, because that's also a really scary attack pattern to have. So I think that that's a good one. I do personally, I'm running Inhuman Weapons, things of that nature. I think that the unexpected guests, so Wedding Crashers, as an extract, while interesting, I think the threat value and the shape is kind of iffy for us. Might be a good way to put it. But I think that also, once again, will transition us pretty well. I heard talking about specific splashes, so I know Red Skull 2, very hot in the meta right now. Hulk, of course, very hot in the meta. So, is anyone running anything different? I know we've actually had the chat where I've added a couple in. So, I know I'm big on like Space Maw in Wakanda. I think he's a pretty phenomenal splash with what he brings. Is anyone else running any interesting or different splashes?
So
I'm
one of
not
the
sure.
one.
Oh, go
Okay,
ahead.
okay, sure, Connor. Just one quick thing. I really like running Proxima in the Wakanda list right now.
Okay.
She's a excellent, I think, extract diver. Because of the reduction in 1 damage and potentially the martial prowess. The way I think about it is that if you can just do incrementally 1 damage each time to each of my units, that means that King T gets a absurd amount of power without me losing efficiency in the models. So I can kind of put Proxima down in the center, and she can move along either side of a C shape and grab one of the side extracts, depending which one I think is weaker. Or, she could also dive like a back point as well. Um, and I think that's been working out pretty good because even if they die, that means that King D probably has enough for 3 power for a bound, like round 1, and it's pretty scary for someone to like have to deal with that.
I like that actually. I've not looked at Proxima's card in probably God knows how long, if I'm being honest with everyone.
Yeah, I think Proxima's probably an underplayed model in general.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that before. I think that's a really interesting call out. I don't have anything too exciting in the way of splashes, but some of the things you guys have talked about, I've been on the fence about Black Panther 1 still being in the list. And I'm curious about what, a Space Maw, Proxima, Luke Cage, like I think there are some really interesting opportunities, especially with, M'Baku's leadership and the hit wild triggers and how much easier they are to get. So Proxima is a really cool call out. That might be something I have to try.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also say not a particularly exciting splash, but one that got touched on briefly and I think is worth mentioning is Namor. Obviously, he's everywhere right now, but I found he is pretty spectacular in the list. The rerolls are always good, bringing a safe grab's good, but mostly it's just like Namor and King T give you absolutely apex combinations of damage output and mobility. And I find when I'm playing, so I'm running Mutant Madmen as one of my secures, which is obviously one of the most spread out secures. And I've just been destroying people on it because Namor and King T are like absurdly good at rotating, and good at the pay to flips. So I've been finding Namor really valuable. I ran an 18 of Namor, King T, and Baku Killmonger in both of my final rounds on the last event I went to, and yeah, he just being able to stay for play 4 tall, so be 1 taller than your opponent, but also still have like the safe grab in there. Has been really useful for certain matchups.
Yep,
That's true.
I can really see that. Yeah. Um. Okay.
The side benefit of Namor also, for anyone that don't realize this, he ignores survival, the card. He
Yeah, he does.
ignores Xavier's Dream. He ignores Bill's damage reduction. So like he's a very interesting tech piece into a lot of
Yes.
those kits.
Yeah, it was
Absolutely.
very useful in my final round against Asgard, I'll tell you that.
Good they had it coming. Um. So speaking of that hit wild trigger, the second that came up, I immediately go to who I can only personally describe as, in my opinion, this is a Jin splash through and through, of Cyclops. So I know that you're running him. I know the reason as I've messaged you, but do you want to share some of the success you've had and why you run Scott Summers under Wakanda?
Sure. Specifically, I like to take Scott Summers in a Hammers matchup because the more dice you can give him, the more he's able to hit his speed of sight trigger. And having just the hit a while to get speed of sight actually turns up his kit quite a bit because he displaces up to size 3. And at the time, Thor, 2 was so rampant as a size 3. So just being to push him around was great. And pushing every Asgardian like around was pretty great. He has hidden run, so he can rotate around board like points, like pretty okay. And he also helps the limited mobility that some of your Wakanda pieces may have. So if you need to move Okoye into place for a bodyguard, need to help move M'Baku like closer
Hmm.
to like a walk attack or a double attack, or even to rotate on a D point, like all those things are like very very interesting. I think under Scott, his problem always was that he needed power to feel the rest of his kit. So being able to get multiple C speeds of sights like off at least one, hoping if you attack twice, does fuel that kid finally and allows him to let him feel like a field leader,
Hmm.
at the end of the day. But but specifically I do like him for hammers because if you give him extra dice, like it becomes the math just becomes very 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 good for you. I think.
Yeah, I honestly haven't looked at the math explicitly. That's one that I'll probably check once we're done discussing. I know another one that was brought up in the chat is Black Widow, the fourth threat version. I personally think I talked about this when I saw her card and we had seen the impending demise of advanced R&D. So just to kind of quickly touch on the advanced R&D discussion, because I know it was mentioned earlier, if you weren't around at the time, there was this wonderful card called Advanced R&D, and it allowed us to play Spirit of Wakanda immediately during the top of a round. So we would essentially start with 3 power amongst 4 characters. And once that went away, a lot of people kind of took away from the faction, kind of went away for a little bit. And I had always kind of had a theory that running her as like a pseudo safe grab, because she does have stealth, she does have martial artist. Most importantly, she has all that matters is the mission, in my opinion. So if she does die to a couple of errant attacks, at least you get to place the thing backwards, and normally she's gonna take 2 attacks to kill. Um, because if you're getting inside of that range 3, but you're not in range 2, you're not contesting that center line objective any longer. It's mathematically impossible. So I think that she had a very interesting take there. Has anyone run her in this group of Wakandan players?
I want to so badly
Um,
because she's like big Proxima basically for the same role.
Yep.
It's like dive a point, get limited amount of damage, then power up King T. King T comes in for a counter punch if you don't do well into Black Widow. But also, for those running intrusions, keep in mind. Oh, actually, deadline destruction and intrusions. Since those things make you drop
Oh.
extracts, I think she becomes a very interesting piece if that was one of your main secures as well.
Hmm.
But again, this is mostly theory because this was coming up and I wanted to talk about it selfishly. Um, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean personally I love it because like her finisher is essentially one of the things we talked about with Black Panther Chosen of Bast is it's basically the same type of finisher. So a wild hit finisher that gives you a reroll any dice on a builder including skulls. That's a phenomenal attack. As we all know, nested attacks very good, especially a nested attack that gives you an advanced medium. I think this is something
Yeah,
that I might have to try now.
and the full rerolls on the attack is pretty nutty too.
Yeah.
She can like more reliably than M'Baku do the double spender thing. Now she doesn't have the size 4 throw as part of it,
Correct.
but like the ability to get the power for the second spender is much more likely due to the rerolls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, the more I'm looking at this card, the more I'm thinking she might end up having to get tested a little bit. She's a little on the fragile side for a 4, but I don't think that that's anything to get too out of whack of. She does have martial artists within too, so that's good.
Yep.
Yeah, she has Blade's reroll tech as well, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you know it costs you power, but it isn't too bad. I have played her in Steve 3 and X Force for a while. And I mean I was impressed. There's just so many fours, right? But yeah, I think she's good, and yeah, I'm quite keen to try her out. And I mean, Cyclops, I actually tried in Steve 3 as well. There was a bit of a faction for that, and yeah, I was really impressed. He was great. He was very fun as much as anything else. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'll try and get both of them on the table. I think it's yeah,
Okay.
Yeah,
sound
and
like
what Yeah, one interesting thing to add about Cyclops and other models like him is field leaders' value has just even more gone up with all these things like samples being you have to be on the point to get the bonus point. So normally you just display someone after they activated, but being able to move your own models back on the points is increasingly like growing in value.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, it is. And I mean, just to continue to almost have that discussion, Red Skull Master of the World, so this would be Red Skull 3 in this case, is kind of in a similar vein, someone who I've played a lot. I know currently not with us, but one of the other Wakandan players, I think currently ranked number 3 is Mike Whalen. Big fan of Red Skull Master of the World as a splash in Wakanda, just to essentially wash King T's power through Red Skull to get better action economy, is a really good way to think about it. So, donating the oodles of power that our king regularly sits on for more throws and more displacement, I think is a phenomenal way to also have a good splash in there.
Yeah, and he
And he
also
fits the I was gonna say, and he fits the most important thing about being Wakandan, which is having a huge alias conflict.
Exactly.
yeah. He's kind of I don't this the temptation to run dual affiliations is too high. I think I'm not sure you get much out of it, but it is tempting, right? Like because Killmonger is Cabal affiliated too, so you do start to think, well, Splash Red Skull 3, you take Killmonger, and then you probably put Baron Zemo in because we were talking about boring splashes briefly with Namor. We just haven't talked about Baron Zemo. I think we probably all have him in the roster, or at least most of us do. I do anyway. At that point, you're halfway to a Cabal splash. I don't know if you need one, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's interesting to be able to have that pivot. It's similar with Jin. Were you playing Avengers as a dual affiliation? Was that you?
well, that was a dual facial with webs, but the
Ah, okay,
idea
okay.
at the time. But no, I mean, like, the fact is, like, you should think about King T, like Connor said, or like everyone has mentioned here. He generates so much power that anyone that can siphon power off of him for abilities, I think, is a really interesting synergy, like, vector you should look at, right, at the end of the day. And I think we're all sort of like slowly seeing that it's like, oh yeah, Red Skull 3, great. Like, MODOK could probably,
Mm-hmm.
use him for a bunch of rerolls and stuff like that. Like, things that are like you wouldn't think of at first, but like maybe worth like testing out as well. It's a lot of unexplored territory with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He might honestly be like one of the best power batteries in the game right now. Um, So something I'm personally running that I don't think has been quite touched on yet is Nick Fury Jr. So this would be Nick Fury with his grunts. Personally, I think with the prevalence of four wide extracts, especially with inhuman weapons, I'm gonna agree with people. I think it was Zach was talking about it earlier. I think that that's going to be a very popular crisis with Midnight Suns and things of that nature. And I think Nick Fury Jr. does a pretty solid job of helping with that actually. So you don't necessarily, if you're really afraid of the clapback, you can run up, grab one from each side. Or you can just run up and position Nick Fury and cover, running up with the grunts in this case, just to specify. And those will, they're very similar to, I need to actually pull the grunts up on screen. Those grunts will hold onto an extract and let you drop it backwards, much like the Black Widow 4 threat would do. So they have that buy you time thing. Once again, that should get you that additional power if they're attacking into them for Black Panther. We've all whiffed an attack into grunts, especially Fury grunts, I'm sure, before. And the best feeling in the world is when Fury gets 2 power from them dying, and King T gets 2 power from them dying, and now you have Bound online. I've been having a lot of success with Nick Fury and his grunts. Has anyone else been running them? I don't know. I think me and Connor have been talking a bit about them.
Yeah, so they're on my list to try. I haven't run them yet, but I think they add basically I've put Toad back in my list as a second two threat.
Mm-hmm.
But if I decide not to go that way, I think that's the slot I would put Nick in. And I think, as was mentioned earlier, I'm not sure how much extract cheesing is going to exist in the meta in terms of like X-Men Inhumans, potentially some others I'm unaware of that can do a lot of safe grabbing, or how many people are going to be bringing Nick themselves. But I think if that becomes a big part of the game, I think just playing your own Nick Fury is a really good answer to it.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you get access to Eye in the Sky. Let's be real, probably one of the best tactics cards in the game. Even if it's only being used once in a game, it's phenomenal for protection, phenomenal for even getting you back into an Okoye bodyguard because of the timing of it. You do move before the attack begins. You can get into a bodyguard range if I remember correctly. I might be wrong on that one.
No, you're definitely right. I've done that.
Yeah, like it's just kind of annoying to one do it and even I think just the other night I was being attacked by a boosted I think a Red Skull attack, and I had eyes out, and you don't get power back from it. He had to then cut to do another attack into not his favorite target. So the card has great mileage for Wakanda too.
It can also be a great way to get out of a Helios laser too, if you can actually walk out of line of sight. Because when it asks you to recheck the line of sight for Helios laser, it actually does bypasses the ignore line of sight portion of Helios laser,
Really?
which I found. Yes,
Yeah.
this was a rules thing that I questioned, and they confirmed. It's like, yeah, it doesn't care. You're just strictly checking the range and line of sight. If they're out of line of sight, they're out of line of sight at that point. Too
Huh.
bad.
I haven't heard that, but I'm gonna keep that in my back pocket. Helios is
Yeah,
growing in some popularity now.
yeah, and if you do decide to play Nick Jr. and I, just watch Vince Kirkov's YouTube
Yes.
video where he spends like 20 minutes covering every interaction. It's
Yes.
super handy.
Yep, I think I had an eyes interaction with Killmonger specifically, and that's the video I pulled up, and I was like, he's got a Killmonger section. Give me like a little bit, I'll get there. So yes, phenomenal resource for Eye in the Sky specifically, and also a great card. Speaking of splashes and their tactics cards, Shush is one that I'm running a lot with Ebony Maw. So as I would say, like the Space Maw pusher of maybe the Wakanda chat. This card's mileage, if you don't know what Shush does, I do have it up on the screen here. It's so good. A phenomenal card. Spending 3 power on a character that generates 4 per turn, just to say no to a superpower can really shut down a lot of your opponent's plans, especially when they don't think you will use it. I've shushed, body slides by 2 on cable. I shushed a celestial technology, which honestly, you should always shush a celestial technology. That's probably a bad thing if those guys are coming to you. I think it can also essentially function as a form of brace or a form of indom for a character like Bill or a character like Kingpin who's going to be picking you up and trying to throw you off of points.
Yeah, it's also incredible into web swings and bound, where you're basically almost getting 2 uses of it, because you basically force them to walk and deny the bonus dice. That happened to my King T in my last game versus Convocation. It was very sad.
That does sound really sad.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any other splashes they want to talk about before we move to our next question?
I think just really briefly, we'd be remiss to mention Helios without pointing out that I think King T can probably reliably contribute 10 power to Helios every time you play it, right? I haven't managed to put Iron Man back on the table with Wakanda recently, but it is very appealing. You're going to have a lot of power at the end of those times. So,
Yeah, and
He also
especially.
does contribute. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, especially with his DR. His DR is gonna help you generate that 10 power on King T very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he kind of fits like the Luke Proxima thing of just being tanky and fueling King T, but also the sizeless push kind of helps if you're going to go more of a mid-range type game plan.
Mm-hmm.
And given the fact that Thanos and Thor 2 were recently nerfed, I would say that you should see stocks on Hulk going up So having
Oh
that
yeah.
one-sided giant health pool seems very tempting now to have a Helios as a plan these days.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, it does. Well, I think that'll probably cover, yeah, especially talking about Helios, three threat Iron Man, phenomenal slot into most lists. I think that'll probably cover most of our splashes. I know that, most people are very familiar with like Beta Ray Bill and things of that nature. Bill, surprising no one, very good. DRing down one, so he only takes one and King T gains the power. Effectively makes that like the most power positive ability for Bill. It's really interesting. Um, and then even using things like heroes. So I always tell people heroes on, King T, while it costs two, it would almost always refund you one. So you have one of the cheaper heroes to hire in the game. I think our next question, this is where we're going to get into more of kind of like our personal opinions on things. So how do you, Zach, I'm going to start with you here actually. How do you feel we as a faction are currently positioned in the meta at large?
So I think these new crisis changes have a big impact. I know we talked about some of the ones new we're playing. I always felt like we were kind of the second tier of attrition. I when Gamma and Demons were in, I think I may have had one of them in my list. But if I went into like a Guardians, they just had a lot punching than I did. So those going away, I'm curious if now like that straight line attrition team being gone, if there's a way that we can fight on deadline, wedding party, intrusions, meteors, where the fights are a little bit more spread out. I think we have a lot of opportunity there with just the regular game plan that we tend to have. I think there's a package like that Jin is running where we can still play in the scenario game really well. So I think as far as like a mixed affiliation that's we're not necessarily the best at attrition, but we're not necessarily the best at scenario, but we're kind of right below whatever the best is in my mind. And I think there's a lot of matchups that we can have a lot of success in, and that these crisis changes in general, I think, will help us. As those crises continue to get like fleshed out.
Mm-hmm. I'll move up the line. So, Jin, how do you feel that Wakanda is currently positioned?
I think as a whole, mid-range is like in a good spot to be, and Wakanda can be a mid-range team. But that, like Zach said, they can also flex into a much more fighty position. So I think because the tide has risen on all mid-range teams, Wakanda's in like a very good competitive spot. But it's also such a new environment right now, and I think most of us would agree that, kind of like the ball's in anyone's court, right? At this
Mm-hmm.
point, to see who's going to come out as king.
I do actually really agree with that. I think the meta boogeymen going away and the new ones who are seeming to rise, I do think we have some really strong matchups into. So I wonder if anyone's going to mention who I'm thinking of. We'll move up to Connor. How do you feel Wakanda is currently positioned?
I think they are in a good spot. I don't think they're necessarily one of the top 3 or 4 things in the game still, but I think they're somewhere in that top 10. I think the interesting thing, which we've kind of mentioned, is the fact that the core of the list that we're really mostly playing is M'Baku and King T. And I feel like King T can kind of play any crises. So I would say my one concern for the list is I still don't love it on D shapes, mostly because of M'Baku himself. And
Mm-hmm.
downgrading to King T's leadership is not something I love to do. That being said, I think there's going to be, it doesn't seem from my perspective that it is a very D shape heavy meta. I think it's kind of just webs running them mostly.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to see a lot of like midline fights and pay to flips. And I think we're really good on all of those. My only concern would be some of the more extracty teams, like Inhumans with the Quicksilver F stealing stuff, could
Mm-hmm.
be an issue. But again, I think um, that's waiting to be seen. And I think that's where you may just want to put Nick in if that
Yep.
does become a problem.
That's exactly. I was gonna honestly say like right after that. That just makes me feel so much more confident with my Nick. I actually just played on into a webs game. I ended up losing, but that was into our my squad goals teammate who is on webs, playing Nick Fury, just grabbing two of the back ones. So there's no chance of him diving to grab one is still just a good play, and it frees up all of the rest of your team to really go kind of handle what's going on in the midline. And then Alma, how are you feeling about them being positioned in the meta?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're pretty strong, right? I've been looking at the Longshank stats while we've been chatting, and like incredibly, look, since the start of the year, we're supposedly the second highest win rate faction. Now, I think that's really untrustworthy because obviously all the crises just changed, everything's all up in the air. But I think it's undeniable they're pretty strong. Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think what Jin said about mid-range teams getting better is important from two angles. One is just like just the nature of the characters we have. You have to a degree play mid-range because you are going to play a 4-threat leader, and your biggest affiliated character is a 5-threat, and you don't have like 5-3s you can take, so you're going to have to play mid-range. But I used to play a lot of Magic the Gathering, and there was this idea that in a mirror match, like a creature-based mirror match, so like a mid-range game, the mid-range team that were like slightly bigger, had slightly better stats, would be heavily advantaged. And I think it's kind of similar for me here. Wakanda are a mid-range team, but they're set up in a way that can predate other mid-range teams by staying 4 wide in almost every combination of crises, and by having Killmonger, who's a bit of a acquired taste, or he's a bit divisive, but he can certainly getting those 2 victory points and spiking out if your mid-range opponent, his biggest model is also a 5-threat, it's not very difficult for Killmonger to just kill Namor and get 2 points plus his extra, and that becomes quite a big advantage against those other mid-range teams. So yeah, I think we're in a good spot, and it'll be exciting to see how it shakes out with the new crises properly, so everyone's getting used to them.
God, yeah, absolutely. I tend to agree, and I think my personal opinion, and I think that I've probably been seen saying this, I honestly do have a really strong inkling that Apocalypse and his various servants of the future Apocalypse are probably going to be a really hard team to contend with, and we just have a really good matchup into them, in my opinion. M'Baku just kind of clowns on that guy.
So I'll say too, like I've kept Spirit of Wakanda in my list. I still think it's a really good card, and that also, like at the right time, can just devastate playing against Apocalypse. As much Red Skull 2 as I play a lot of Cosmic Obliteration as well, and so kind of having both of those in the pocket, and the combination of Red Skull 2, King T, and M'Baku, like Apocalypse is really not that durable. And so the models that we have can just put a hurting on him really quick and get him flipped over a lot quicker than I think a lot of other teams can.
Absolutely. And speaking of Spirit, just really quick, I think the conditional clearing also something I run into like a webs matchup. Great card. Kind of limiting that all webbed up turn after it happens. Giving them one good attack, maybe 2 good attacks is okay. Giving them the whole board of attacks, that's how you lose into webs. So bring Spirit of Wakanda there.
I think it's kind of worth thinking about against Crimson as well, right? Like, because Crimson tend to bring 2 or maybe even 3 characters who can stagger. And obviously stagger is it's the best one to clear, right?
Yep.
Well, normally. So yeah, I think it's worth considering there as well.
Yeah, I basically treat Spirit as a condition clearing card at this point. I don't think I really ever bring it. Like, sometimes you'll bring it and use it for the other effects, but I basically only bring it for the condition matchups at this point. And it's really strong there.
And yeah, speaking of those big stagger heavy teams, like Avengers right now, very, very stagger heavy as a team. So Spirit of Wakanda there, probably best used, and we'll be touching on this later from a personal experience, best used to clear the staggers rather than play aggressively. So this one, I'll go ahead and we'll start with Connor here. Connor, do you have any advice for new Wakanda players who really want to up their game?
I'm going to go with a controversial take here. Buy a 3D print of King T'Challa. Try him out. If you decide you really want to spend the money on the big box, go ahead and do it. But if you're not playing the faction because you're worried about the cost of that box, just buy a 3D print. Like, it is a very, because I've heard a lot of people talk about Wakanda and they're like, really don't want to buy this box. So it's like, listen, if you want to play the faction, you really want to play King T, either proxy him or buy a proxy and just have some fun. And then if you decide you love the faction and want the big fancy model, you can get it then.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And I'll throw this one out there. I have a spare 3D printed King T that I bought on Etsy before I bought the box myself. I will bring that with me. If anyone who hears this is coming to Squad Goals, come find me. I'll have a jersey with my name on the back of it. I will give you that proxy just immediately. Go take it home. Go play King T. Spread the love. Come find me. I'll make sure it's magnetized and everything. It won't be painted. That's on you. Then we'll go to Alma. How do you have any advice for new Wakanda players?
I think learn to manipulate and track priority well. I think you are going to want to try and keep priority and days and then kill model. And I mean, that's like attrition 101, I guess. But if you are trying to get to the point where you're getting the most out of King T, that's really where he excels, I think, where you've done, like, maybe you've only done one 8 dice reroll 2 energy attack into someone, but you spiked them out. Well, if you plan that turn properly, you then also have priority next turn to KO them. And I think that's kind of one of the best parts of the team, and it's worth focusing on that.
Yes, no. Priority control. Probably one of the quickest ways to improve your game is knowing when to leave someone on one and when to remove them from the table at the same time. And at this stage, we'll go Zach, and we'll finish up with Jin. Zach, do you have any advice for new Wakanda players who really want to up their game?
So I really want to emphasize what Alma said too, that like understanding priority makes a big difference with a lot of the models and cards that we're running. Being able to control priority and to just have that continued success with attrition is really big. I think the two things I would say, because I think we all pretty much are running M'Baku just about every game, is kind of be patient and trust the process there. That dice mod of getting a wild and turning it into a hit, there's going to be games it doesn't go your way, but just be patient with it because it really pays off a lot more than you realize. And I think M'Baku as a model is that way too. He feels a little slow, a little clunky to begin with, but once you really start to understand what he can do, like it just unlocks the whole level of the game for you. And I would say be patient with Wakanda Forever. I know it being a cheap card, having 2 to 3 models, having some explosive attacks, you can get excited and want to drop that immediately. But I think some of the games that I've had the most success is when I've been very patient. Okay, I'm okay if this waits until maybe the top of turn 3 and I immediately get a KO, or maybe it's the top of turn 4 and it's a KO in a daze and now the game's basically over. So you can get a little excited because of how cheap and how powerful the card is, but learning to have some patience and play it at the right time will make a big difference in wins and losses.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. That's one of the points that I have kind of written over here on the side to make sure we do touch on. So thank you for that one. And then Jin, any advice from you for Wakanda players?
I'm just gonna shotgun a bunch of random stuff here. So, with Okoye, please don't put her on a back point to score back points. She is best used to protect your guys. So don't let her be a back deep point sitter. Have so many friends that done that. Please don't do that. If she protects M'Baku or your large pieces, she's such a great role player in that instance. For M'Baku, I think what's going to happen is a lot of times he's just going to walk up, he's going to get punched in the face quite a bit, but you kind of want that at the end of the day. And all of his like action economy comes from his spender, so like trusting the process to get to the spender, and then you can see like, oh, this model is lit, like insanely so. But also like there's going to be, I don't know about you guys, but I think like M'Baku's going to die a good amount of time, like during a match, and that's kind of okay. As long as you've done enough work to sort of make his points like worthwhile at the end of the day, and that's okay. Let's see. I think survival is a great break glass button in case we lose priority. In this game, especially King T is a fantastic player of survival because while he doesn't die once you play it, he also is still getting power from all of his friends from the Defender of Wakanda, which means that when he gets to go again, he might actually be able to do all the things he needs to do. So think about survival more. I think this might be a hot take, but I think that is actually the best King T'Challa card inadvertently is survival.
I would second that actually and say survival has a great effect, and even if you're playing attrition, it's still really worth having in your 10. And there's gonna be times you lose priority into something like Midnight Suns, and you have to keep King T alive one more round, and so that card can just make a huge impact in the game and can be really, really important.
It's also great on something like Mcron, where you can purposefully give up prio by killing two things and then getting the last activation of the turn to go flip a bunch of points and then not lose King T for it.
Yes,
Yeah.
all honestly, all of those are very
I
good
find it
survival
hard to
tricks.
hit, though.
Yeah, no,
Because
for sure.
I am a Wisdom of the Ancestors addict, so it is hard for me not to include that every game.
What if you took both?
Yep.
I sometimes do, to be fair.
Any more shotgun tips or trip tips? Sorry.
Yeah, so as a general rule in Marvel Crisis Protocol, if you are a team that's looking to score out, try to think about the pace of your scoring, right? In the sense that like if you're getting X points a turn, so let's say your goal is to get 4 points a turn, that means you're going to win by turn 4 if they're not keeping up pace with you, right? At the end of the day, right? So having that last turn and you look at the board state and you're like, it's like, oh, we can now crescendo into a Wakanda Forever or a bunch of spenders that's going to deny a bunch of activations because everyone's been taking a beating and like left on 1 health. This is the turn that you can flip everything down, take last activations, get all the points, get all the extras you can to sort of win out. So timing, like everyone said, is like a big deal. So if you can engineer it so that that last round where you're like, oh, okay, if I just daze a bunch of people or pull a bunch of people off, like that could be a big deal to sort of like close out the game in that way. So don't use Wakanda Forever just for the sake of Wakanda Forever. Think about like where it's going to fit in your pacing of scoring, I think, if you can think of it that way as well. On top of the priority, like, control.
Yes. I think like a good way to almost put it for like Wakanda Forever for survival and for Spirit of Wakanda is they like almost on a base level, maybe excluding Spirit of Wakanda, tend to look like very straightforward cards, but they are very toolboxy for us as a faction because of the ways that we can use them and the ways that we honestly at points of time can abuse them. Wisdom of the Ancestors, I gotta parrot that one. Amazing card. If you're playing King T, as crazy as this one might sound, my advice there is get Wisdom in your hands. So if you're printing King T's 3D model that you found online, also go to your local library, go somewhere and print this tactics card. You want this tactics card. It is amazing. He funds it in his sleep so quickly. Any last minute advice for those new Wakandan players before we move on to kind of an additional like tips and tricks section? Awesome. No problem there. So I would say maybe my last advice, just to kind of parrot it, I would kind of class Wakanda as a tempo control team. While we do have some of the harder hitting, with King T and M'Baku, those two models are phenomenal. I would also like to parrot the advice of be patient with M'Baku. His job is to take, 3 to 4 hits, go down, and wake up and do 2 spenders. Those double spender turns are probably some of his highest highs in the game, and you will feel them when they happen. And at times you will hit those low lows, but when you really get down to the brass tacks of it, a 4 cost throw of a size 4 character, even at its base level, most of us would pay to throw a size 4 character medium. Adding 8 dice to it is just kind of a bonus. So I know Alma wanted to talk about some additional tricks that we've had success with, so I'll let you kind of take this one off to start with.
Oh yeah, so there's just a couple of like I guess more sort of tactical low level stuff that I've tried to kind of stick to. So for example, I find you're talking about M'Baku and getting the most out of them. I think if you are playing Shuri, keeping them together is great, right? Because he probably makes the best use of her rerolls. And then also we were talking about Shuri getting someone diving Shuri and killing her. That's a lot less enticing when M'Baku's standing near her, right? And Rhino is perfect for diving Shuri, but then M'Baku is perfect for bullying Rhino. So there's that kind of thing. I think they pair together quite nicely, especially in a BMAT. Shuri's kind of good at standing on an infinity formula and shooting someone off the other infinity formula ahead of her. And M'Baku is kind of walking between the two with his spender and beating the hell out of people. So yeah, I like pairing them up. And yeah, just on M'Baku as well. If you are playing size 4, if you are playing Hulk, because M'Baku doesn't take character collisions, sometimes you can backstop Hulk with him and stop him getting thrown into Shuri or someone else squish her. It's kind of a good trick. And then just I think a lot of the time you don't really use King T's spender because his builder is so good. But when you do use it, I think the move is actually the really cool part of it because, as we talked about, he has so much power. You are often able to like flip a point, spender, walk, patch up. He will have that kind of level of power. Or maybe not that because that's it. Yeah, that's 10. So he could theoretically do that, right? So
Yep.
that's the kind of thing that can happen. So yeah, I think those are probably the main ones. There were a lot with Black Panther 1, but now that I'm not playing them, I've kind of forgotten them all.
So some of the other tricks that I like to use, one of them, so I recently burned myself pretty hard, I would say, playing into Curtis, using spirits. So sometimes when you're in these matchups that might be very parity heavy, and you don't have the ability to kind of control priority, sometimes maybe you're into a better player. In your opinion, you're like having to almost play uphill. So I think we have a really unfortunate matchup into what would be like the Avengers Stagger Squad. Well, we're really aggressive tempo. I find them to be very defensive tempo. So they can really kind of sustain through most of our bigger hits. I find at times, and I don't always want to recommend this as a blanket statement, using Spirit to get an early M'Baku spender off can be highly beneficial. It's not always a good play. I'm going to continue to preface by saying that because I don't want people to come to me in the Discord and say, "Hey, I did this and I lost." It makes sense in very like niche situations, but it is something to keep in mind. We are playing an aggressive snowball-y faction, so if you can keep that snowball going, or sometimes if you need to kind of give it a like kind of a kickstart, might be a good way to put it. It is sometimes worth it to do that. Um, I don't run Infinity Formula, but Infinity Formula is a phenomenal place to also run Spirit of Wakanda. If you have anyone, so even if like maybe Okoye and M'Baku are hanging out on a point together, or Shuri's kind of just generally near it, you can very easily get off a very impactful Spirit and have it not hurt the other character models' economy for power.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Actually, just while we're on, you mentioned Spirit. Um, Spirit and Wisdom of the Ancestors and Wakanda Forever are all just active cards that can be played at any point. And
Yes.
I think this is something that once you play Wakanda for a while, you just do all the time. But if you're just getting into them, you should know that you can play them at any point, including before you've activated a character, which lets you do stuff like I'll play Wisdom of the Ancestors now on King T'Challa, and then I'll play Wakanda Forever and see who I kill. And then, oh, well, now King T'Challa doesn't really seem like he's in any danger because he counts skulls on defense, and I just daze someone with him. So I will leave him, and I'll instead activate M'Baku over here. So that's actually incredibly powerful. Being able to do that, you can do that, do your Spirit, do your Wakanda Forever, and then say, well, actually now I'm going to play Spirit of Wakanda and do the trick and give 2 power to him back and say, oh, I'll activate him and spender him. So the combination of those cards is really still very powerful.
Oh,
Partly
absolutely.
because of the timing.
Yep. So the other thing to keep in mind there is like with Wakanda Forever. So if you're taller than your opponent by several models, and you can pass, in between those passes, you are still considered an active player. You can use Wakanda Forever and then choose to pass.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Like it is.
I've never done that.
I did not know
So
that. Yeah,
yes,
that's really good.
so using that when someone maybe if they have a double activation in front of you and you're like, man, I really don't want to essentially let them double activate on you. You could, in some very particular board states, this is all very board context, pop a Wakanda Forever to stop a future activation, and you still maintain priority because you didn't activate a character.
Oh man, I kind of want to pull this off now versus a grunt character where you
Yep.
will kind of forever purposefully give up prio and then last activation just pull someone off a point with King D to win. That would be so sick.
there's some very interesting and like niche interactions there, which is like kind of goes to continue to talk about the flexibility of that card is just phenomenal. We talked about a lot about Jin brought up like going parity. Maybe you're scoring 4 VPs around. If you don't know this, vast majority of the crisis layouts will end you up on either 8 points per round or 9 points per round. So a great tool to either A, fix your parity, or B, accelerate is Usurp the Throne. And one of my favorite tricks, which I'm sure everyone in this in this group hopefully knows, is if you're on 14 VPs, or if you're on 15 VPs maybe, and you Usurp the Throne and you daze or KO that character, you immediately win the game. You do not have to play further. Those VPs are immediately scored, and you have had the win condition of 16 or higher. It is phenomenal to get a mid-round usurp off, and it can also really threaten different characters and make it so you can't ignore Killmonger. I've had several games where just because he's on the board, my opponent either has to A, go try to kill him, because if he gets to, charge Spender or attack, charge double attack with Usurp, and even with Wakanda Forever on the board, that model is so likely to die, it's almost painful. And those two VPs will just push you right over.
Well, it's a good thing you have a faction that has a built-in bodyguard and a reroll
exactly.
machine.
Man, it's a great day to be a Wakandan. I don't think I am actually running out of. I think I'm out of questions at this stage. Does anyone have any tips or tricks they'd like to bring up that we haven't discussed yet? All right.
I just want to say, sorry. I was going to say, just like we've talked about, be patient, enjoy it. They're a lot of fun. They're very snowbally. If you're used to some more consistent attrition teams, that's not really how Wakanda tends to work. It's a big snowball, and you're just falling down the hill. But it's a ton of fun to play with.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, does anyone have any last-minute questions they'd like to talk about? We have just a little bit more time, and then I'll go ahead and let everyone run away. I know we're in very different time zones while we're recording this. All right. Well, hey, I don't think we do. I'll probably end up cutting a little bit of that out. But hey, thanks to all of you guys for joining me tonight, this afternoon, depending on where you're at. I really do appreciate it. This has been a phenomenal discussion. So we'll be posting this up on our YouTube channel, which I believe is youtube.com/pupperpapas. That would be mine and Cole's. We tend to post a couple of videos there every now and then. We do a couple streams every now and then. So keep an eye out for some future MCP content. I will personally be at Squad Goals May 3rd and 4th, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. I apologize, Taco Chat, if I'm wrong. But yeah, come visit me there if you want to talk about Wakanda and we haven't talked before. Feel free to message me on the Discord. My username is the Sweepy Man. I'm in almost every Marvel Discord that's for a podcast, and I'm in the main one. Please come to the Wakanda chat. I want to also credit Alma and Connor and Zach for coming into that, and Jen for coming into the Wakanda chat and really helping us make it a place for positive, constructive roster discussions and positive and constructive Wakanda discussions, even if it does turn into, hey, which six that are we looking at splashing this week? Does anyone have anything new? So I do really appreciate all of that. And, if you're new to the faction, come talk to us. We're always willing to give help. We're always willing to give tips. And like I mentioned, I'll try to post my roster as it currently stands on Jarvis into the YouTube description. And if any of you are willing to share rosters, by all means, please feel free to send me those. I'll put them in the description so people can kind of take a look at what we're running as a group.